Breaking Bad was a battlefield where sin ruled and virtue barely survived. Every character either lost their soul or fought like hell to keep it. From cartel monsters with rage issues to quiet fixers who died following orders. This is the 7 sinful versus 7 heavenly Breaking Bad characters, starting with Tuco Salamanca. Tuco Salamanca embodied pure wrath in Breaking Bad's gritty underworld, a hurricane of violence that destroyed everything in his path. After serving time with Skinny Pete in prison, this high-ranking distributor for the Mexican cartel established his own cantina as headquarters, where his explosive temper made him as unpredictable as the blue meth he would later distribute. The nephew of cartel legend, Hector Salamanca, Tuco built his reputation through fear and brutality. His operation expanded rapidly after Crazy 8's disappearance, absorbing the vacant territory and establishing Tuco as the dominant kingpin in Albuquerque. Though the DEA brought him in for questioning regarding Crazy 8's disappearance, they had to release him because of lack of evidence. Tuco's violent tendencies got worse with his increasing drug use. When Jesse Pinkman, on Skinny Pete's recommendation, approached him at his headquarters with a pound of Walt's meth, Tuco's true nature revealed itself. After snorting some product off the tip of a knife and appearing impressed with the quality, he invited Jesse to name his price, creating a brief illusion of a legitimate business transaction. The facade crumbled instantly, and instead of paying the $35,000, Tuco brutally beat Jesse with a bag of cash, unleashing his wrath with such violence that Jesse ended up hospitalized with broken ribs and his neck in a brace. When Walt later confronted him as Heisenberg in the same cantina, Tuco's rage switched over into reluctant respect, only after Walt destroyed much of the hideout, violence being the only language that Tuco truly understood.
You got balls. I'll give you that.
His most disturbing display of wrath occurred at the junkyard meeting in a no rough stuff type deal, when his associate, No Dose, simply reminded Walt and Jesse to remember who they were working for. Tuco perceived this as disrespect to their new business partners. High on the blue meth he just snorted, Tuco savagely beat No Dose's face to a pulp while Walt and Jesse watched in horror. Then he casually showed him his bloody knuckles while laughing, completely detached from the brutality he just inflicted. The wrath didn't end there. No Dose died from his injuries, and Tuco, rather than showing remorse, further desecrated the body by kicking it multiple times in blind rage. Later, after kidnapping Walt and Jesse to a desert cottage, his paranoia-fueled violence culminated in a shootout with DEA agent Hank Schrader that left Tuco dead with a bullet to the head. Tuco's reign of terror rippled throughout the Albuquerque drug scene long after his death. His violent legacy inspired fear in competitors and allies alike, creating a power vacuum that allowed Gus Fring to consolidate power. His death also triggered the arrival of his cousins, the deadly Salamanca twins, who came north to avenge him in season 3, showing Tuco's wrath continue to claim victims even from beyond the grave. I think Tuco showed Walt and Jesse exactly what they would become if they continued down their path. The wrath that consumed Tuco eventually consumed them both, just in different ways. But while Tuco represented uncontrolled fury, another deadly sin was lurking in plain sight at the heart of Walt's transformation, masked by respectability, no less destructive. Deep beneath the beige clothes and meek demeanor of Walter White festered a wounded pride that would eventually poison everything it touched. When diagnosed with lung cancer in the pilot episode, this unassuming chemistry teacher unleashed decades of resentment that had been silently building. The seeds of Walt's pride were planted long before his 50th birthday. His Nobel Prize contribution hung mockingly on his wall, while former colleagues Elliot and Gretchen Schwartz built a billion-dollar empire from what he considered his work. Every morning, he scrubbed wealthy students' cars at the A1A car wash, swallowing daily humiliations while his pregnant wife sold items on eBay to make ends meet. These perceived injustices created the perfect breeding ground for Heisenberg. His transformation accelerated when he rejected Elliot's offer to pay for his treatment. Though presented as dignity, this rejection revealed his true motivation. Walt couldn't bear accepting help from the man who had everything he believed should have been his. His pride demanded he find another way, even if it meant becoming the danger he once feared.
Let's get something straight. The chemistry, is my realm. I am in charge of the cooking.
Walt's obsession with his product's purity showcased his pride's toxic nature. He rejected a $5 million buyout that would have secured his family future, instead declaring his intention to build an empire business. Later, he forced rival dealer DeClan to announce his street name, not because it was practical, but because he needed his legend recognized. As bodies piled around him, Walt remained convinced of his own indispensability. When Gail's murder led to Gus nearly slitting Victor's throat before his eyes, Walt stood unflinching, certain his skills protected him. Even as Gus built a separate lab and groomed new chemists, Walt's pride blinded him to his own replaceability.
I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it. And I was really I was alive.
The ultimate price of Walt's pride was paid by everyone who loved him. Hank died in the desert because Walt couldn't bear losing. Jesse endured torture because Walt's ego couldn't tolerate betrayal. His family lost everything because he refused the humility that might have saved them. I believe his most telling moment came when he watched Jane choke to death. Not because he needed to protect Jesse, but because he couldn't bear anyone taking what he considered rightfully his. While Walt's pride disguised itself as family devotion, another sin lurked by. From the first moment Jesse Pinkman appeared on screen, falling naked from a neighbor's window during a DEA raid, his character embodied raw desire in its most self-destructive form. Unlike Walt's calculated pride, Jesse's lust manifested as a desperate hunger for anything that might fill the emptiness inside him. Season 1 introduced Jesse as a small-time meth cook who lived for immediate gratification.
Every jibhead from here to Timbuktu is gonna want to taste.
When Walt gave him $7,000 to purchase their RV lab, Jesse couldn't resist blowing most of it at a strip club, settling for Combo's used family vehicle for just $1,400 instead. This pattern of choosing short-term pleasure over long-term security defined his early character, with Jesse routinely sabotaging his own interests just to satisfy momentary cravings. His relationship with meth itself was the purest expression of his lust. After resolving to break ties with Walt, Jesse couldn't resist getting high on their product. The scene in which he snorts crystal at his friend's house revealed his inability to deny himself, even when sobriety might save him.
I'm the bad guy.
Jesse admitted in No Mas, acknowledging what his compulsions had cost him and others. Though meant as self-condemnation, this statement revealed his growing self-awareness about the destructive nature of his appetites, but he didn't really do anything to stop it. Jesse's romantic entanglements further explored this theme. His relationship with Jane Margulis quickly evolved from genuine connection to mutually destructive enabling. In their most intimate scene, Jane introduced Jesse to heroin, creating a new, stronger hunger that nearly consumed him. Their final night together, shooting speedballs while dreaming of New Zealand, showed two people choosing oblivion over reality, with fatal consequences for Jane. After Jane's death, Jesse's lust transformed, but never diminished. He threw money at his problems, filling his empty house with people and possessions. The continuous party he hosted wasn't about joy, but desperation to avoid facing his grief alone. Even in his moments of generosity, like attempting to give away his blood money, came from lust's exhaustion rather than actual virtue. Jesse's character arc showed lust's full spectrum, from fleeting pleasures to soul-crushing addiction. He wanted to fill the void left by his estranged family and the moral compromises that hollowed him out. While Walt's pride made him a monster, Jesse's lust made him a tragedy, a soul who wanted too much and too little all at once. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying deep dives like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest of these breakdown, because trust me, each sin hits harder than the last. Where Jesse's hungers were personal and self-destructive, another Breaking Bad character's desire took a more calculating form, coveting not just wealth, but absolute control. Behind the press suit and professional demeanor of Gustavo Fring operated the most precisely calculated form of greed in the Breaking Bad universe. While others sought money for immediate pleasures or security, Gus's avarice took the form of insatiable hunger for power and control that spanned decades. The owner of Los Pollos Hermanos first appeared as a mild-mannered fast food entrepreneur in season 2, but this carefully cultivated image concealed his vast methamphetamine operation. When Walt and Jesse sought a distributor, they unknowingly encountered a man whose empire stretched across the American Southwest, a business architect who patiently structured every detail of his operation to maximize both profit and power while keeping himself virtually untouchable. Unlike Walt's reckless pride or Tuco's violent impulses, Gus's greed operated with sharp precision. His distribution network, using industrial laundry facilities and chicken delivery trucks as cover, showed a man who wasn't building wealth for absolute dominion over his territory. Gus's motivations deepened when we learned that his decades-long operation was fueled by a desire for vengeance against Don Eladio and the cartel who murdered his partner Max. Yet even this revenge was executed with calculating patience, revealing a man whose appetite for retribution was only matched by his willingness to wait for the perfect moment.
I don't believe fear to be an effective motivator. I want investment.
Gus's most revealing moment came when he finally achieved his revenge against the cartel. After poisoning Don Eladio and his capos with tequila, Gus forced himself to vomit the poison he had also ingested, demonstrating his willingness to endure extreme suffering for his goals. Standing over Eladio's floating body in the same pool where Max had been murdered, Gus straightened his tie, a small gesture betraying enormous satisfaction. It was the culmination of a 20-year plan fueled by pure, patient greed for absolute control. The most chilling example example of Gus's greed came when he silently sliced Victor's throat with surgical precision before calmly changing back into his work clothes, washing his hands, and telling Walt and Jesse to get back to work. The ruthless killing was Gus demonstrating complete dominance over his environment and the people within it. His emotionless demeanor during the murder revealed a man so consumed by his desire for power that human life had become merely another variable in his calculations.
Never make the same mistake twice.
Gus's facade finally cracked when his lifelong enemy, Hector Salamanca, detonated a bomb, taking Gus with him in a final act of revenge. In his last moments, with half of his face blown off, Gus still adjusted his tie before collapsing, a final futile gesture of control from a man whose insatiable greed had ultimately destroyed him. I believe Gus was perhaps the most dangerous villain in the series because his greed was systematic rather than impulsive, making him almost machine-like in his pursuit of power. While Gus built his empire through patient accumulation, another character embraced a far more unrestrained form of greed that left a trail of suffering behind. Hector Salamanca, once the feared patriarch of the Salamanca family and high-ranking member of the Juarez cartel, embodied envy's corrosive power as it ate away at him from within. In his prime, Hector was a formidable figure in the cartel hierarchy. He controlled territory, commanded respect, and lorded his power over others, including a young Gus Fring. But as Don Eladio favored Gus's methodical business approach over Hector's old-school brutality, the seeds of Hector's consuming envy were planted. This reached his breaking point when Hector suffered a stroke after refusing to take his heart medication during a rage-filled episode directed at Gus's success. Hector's envy towards Gus grew more venomous after he became wheelchair-bound and mute, forced to communicate only through a brass bell. Though appearing senile and fixated on television, Hector remained sharp enough to spot Walt poisoning Tuco's food and alerted his nephew. His mind was trapped in a failing body, amplifying his resentment towards those with power he once possessed. The most devastating blow came when Gus brought Jesse to inform Hector that Don Eladio and all other cartel members were dead, and that Jesse had killed Joaquin, Hector's grandson and the last living Salamanca. Gus dangled Don Eladio's amulet in Hector's face, but Hector still refused, left alone with the knowledge that everything he'd built was gone while his rival had triumphed. Hector's envy finally found its outlet when Walt approached him with a plan to kill Gus. Despite his hatred for Walt, Hector's envy towards Gus burned hotter. In his final moments, after luring Gus to his room by pretending to be a DEA informant, Hector at last did what Gus had demanded for so long. He looked him directly in the eyes, but rather than submission, his gaze conveyed pure hatred as he repeatedly rang his bell, detonating the bomb that killed them both. He was willing to sacrifice everything, even his own life, just to deny his rival the satisfaction of winning. And while envy is horrible, the next one is right up there with it. In the shadows of Breaking Bad's grand criminal enterprises lurked a different kind of excess. Marie Schrader's insatiable appetite for things she didn't need and couldn't rightfully claim. Her gluttony manifested not through food, but through a compulsive consumption of objects, attention, and involvement in matters that weren't hers to take. Marie's kleptomania first appeared in season 1, when she gifted Skylar an expensive jeweled tiara for her baby shower. When Skylar attempted to return it, she was nearly arrested because the tiara was stolen. This wasn't an isolated incident, but a pattern that resurfaced whenever Marie felt stress or lacking control. As Hank noted, he thought her tendency to steal shiny things was under control, revealing that this had been a long-standing issue. Her most pronounced bout of kleptomania came when she visited homes for sale, creating elaborate fictional identities while pilfering valuables. In one particularly disturbing scene, she even stole a framed family photo, something with no monetary value but immense sentimental worth to its owners. This revealed her gluttony's true nature. It wasn't about material gain, but emotional consumption. Marie's gluttony extended beyond objects to information and drama. She consistently inserted herself into others' affairs, hungrily consuming their emotional turmoil. She repeatedly pressed Skylar to reveal Walt's secrets during visits to see her children. Her immediate response to learning about Walt's meth empire was to attempt to take Holly from Skylar, snatching at parental authority that wasn't hers to claim. Perhaps most revealing was her reaction after learning of Hank's death. Dressed in her signature purple, a color representing luxury and excess throughout history, Marie collapsed to her knees, consumed by grief. Yet even in this devastating moment, first impulse had been to gloat to Skylar at the car wash about Walt's capture. Unable to resist consuming consuming the satisfaction of her sister's downfall before having all the facts. The final transformation of Marie's character came in her therapy session, where she confessed fantasies about poisoning Walt. Her therapist's concerned reaction revealed how far Marie's consumption had gone, from objects to imagining consuming another's life. Though she claimed she wouldn't act on these thoughts, the satisfaction she derived from them showed that her gluttony extended into darker territories. I believe Marie's gluttony served as a counterpoint to the grander sins in the series, a reminder that ordinary people can be consumed by their appetites just as destructively as drug lords. Her kleptomania was a manifestation of the same human weakness that drove Walt's empire building, just on a smaller scale. In the end, Marie's character arc showed that gluttony, when left unchecked, consumes not just what's desired, but the person doing the desiring. While Marie indulged in her appetite for possessions and drama, another character's deadly sin manifested in a totally different way. Ted Beneke embodied sloth in every decision he made. He inherited rather than build Beneke fabricators, and watched passively as it failed. Instead of making tough choices, he took shortcuts, lazily cooking the books with fraud so obvious even the IRS caught it. His personal life reflected the same pattern. He pursued Skylar only when she was vulnerable, placing his hand over hers when she was emotional about Walt's cancer, the easiest possible move requiring minimal effort. Even his charm was a shortcut, replacing substance with an easy smile and calculated flattery. Ted's defining moment came when Skylar arranged $621,552.33 to pay his IRS debt. Rather than solving his problems, he leased a Mercedes and refused to pay the taxes, attempting to blackmail her for more. He couldn't even commit to his own criminal scheme properly. Where Walt meticulously built an empire, Ted couldn't be bothered to properly save the one handed to him. His fate perfectly reflected his sin. While fleeing from Huon Cuby, who demanded that he write a check to the IRS, Ted's panic escape ended with him tripping over a rug and breaking his neck. His careless movements mirrored the same lack of attention that doomed his business. The man who spent his life avoiding hard work ended up paralyzed in a hospital bed, physically manifesting the spiritual paralysis that had defined him all along, unable to move just as he always been unwilling to. But not everyone in the show went over to the dark side. Amid Breaking Bad's moral wilderness, Gil Bedecker stood as a singular embodiment of chastity, not in the sexual sense, but in his pure devotion to his craft and the uncorrupted innocence he maintained despite his illegal work. With his elaborate coffee brewing apparatus and recitations of Walt Whitman, Gil represented something untainted in a world of contamination. Unlike other characters who embodied the meth business for money, power, or survival, Gil approached chemistry with an almost religious reverence. When we first met him in season 3, he excitedly unpacks equipment for the super lab, handling each piece with the care of a priest arranging sacred objects. His enthusiasm wasn't for wealth or status, but for the pursuit of excellence itself. As he explained to Walt during their brief partnership, he believed that consenting adults should have access to whatever substances they desired, revealing a philosophical purity rather than mercenary motives.
Of the lab. Because it's all still magic.
Gil's apartment revealed a man devoted to intellectual pursuits and simple pleasures. His modest home contained books of poetry, scientific journals, and homemade equipment for brewing that perfect cup of tea. Most revealing was Gil's interaction with Jesse when confronted with his own murder in full measure. When Jesse appeared at his door with a gun, Gil didn't respond with anger or violence. He offered Jesse his possessions and pleaded for his life, with the innocence of someone who couldn't comprehend such brutality. In his final moments, Gil exhibited no hate or vengeance, only confusion and fear at the violence invading his ordered world. What made Gil's chastity important is how it led to his destruction. In the corrupted world of Breaking Bad, his purity made him vulnerable. He lacked the moral flexibility to navigate the treacherous landscape around him. Me personally, I believe that Gil represents what Walt might have been had he remained devoted solely to chemistry rather than becoming consumed by pride and power. A man who pursued excellence for its own sake rather than as a means to dominance. Now if you made it this far, once again, don't forget to subscribe. There's still more to come, and trust me, it only gets darker from here. While Gil's intellectual purity represented one form of virtue in Breaking Bad's moral landscape, another character didn't know that it would be his undoing. Beneath Hank Schrader's macho exterior and off-colored jokes lay Breaking Bad's most steadfast moral compass, a man whose balanced approach to life represented temperance in a world spiraling towards extreme.
My name is Asac Schrader. You can go fuck yourself.
While those around him succumbed to greed, pride, or sloth, Hank maintained a disciplined middle path that kept him effective both as a DEA agent and as a human being. When we first met Hank, he's bragging at Walt's birthday party, showing off his gun and bragging about drug busts. This initial portrayal suggests a one-dimensional character, but his development revealed a man who carefully balanced toughness with compassion and duty with empathy. His measured approach was evident in how he mentored Walt Jr. without overstepping his bounds, and how he balanced his career ambitions with genuine concern for public safety. Hank's temperance was tested severely after a shootout with Tuco Salamanca and grilled. Rather than celebrating, he suffered panic attacks in an elevator at work. He admitted to Walt that his experience in El Paso was traumatic, comparing it to Apocalypse Now. These moments revealed a man grappling with his demons, but refusing to be defined by them. Unlike Walt, who used his cancer as justification for moral abandonment, Hank channeled his trauma into becoming more effective at his job. His most difficult test came after the Salamanca cousin shot him. Bedridden and bitter, Hank lashed out at Marie and seemed to abandon his disciplined nature. Yet even in this dark period, temperance guided his recovery. Despite Marie's celebration of his minimal progress in physical therapy, Hank remained realistic without surrendering to despair, and he didn't indulge in self-pity, nor did he rush his recovery, maintaining the balanced perspective that characterized his approach to life. What makes Hank the embodiment of temperance was his ability to pursue justice without becoming consumed by it. When investigating Gail Bedeker's murder, Hank initially found closure in believing that he had discovered Heisenberg. When Walt's pride couldn't resist suggesting that the real Heisenberg was still at large, Hank resumed his investigation, not out of obsession, but out of duty to truth. Hank's final moments demonstrated his ultimate temperance. Facing death at Jack's hands, he neither begged nor raged. He acknowledged the reality of his situation with clear-eyed acceptance, telling Walt that Jack has made up his mind long ago. His final words reflected a man at peace with himself and his choices.
You're the smartest guy I ever met. And you're too stupid to see. He made up his mind 10 minutes ago.
While Hank maintained his moral balance through disciplined temperance, another character found strength through an entirely different virtue. In a universe defined by chemical reactions and drug empires, Walter White Jr. provided Breaking Bad's purest form of charity, the selfless giving of love even when it seemed undeserved. While his father built a meth empire supposedly for his family, it was the son who truly embodied what family means through unwavering loyalty and generosity of spirit. From the first episode, Walt was characterized by his ability to give without expectation of return. Despite his cerebral palsy and the everyday challenges it presented, he consistently focused on others' needs rather than his own hardships. When his father initially refused cancer treatment, Walt Jr. confronted him with raw honesty.
You're a pussy. All the stuff I've been through, and you're scared of a little chemotherapy?
His courage to speak the truth came not from anger, but from deep concern. He was willing to sacrifice his father's momentary approval to save his life. As the Walter White family fractured under the weight of Walt's secrets, Walt Jr. became its emotional anchor. When police arrived at their home after Walt moved back in against Skylar's wishes, Walt Jr. instinctively defended his father. He gave his father the benefit of the doubt when everyone else withheld it, offering emotional shelter when no one else would. The true depth of Walt Jr.'s charity emerged when he found his beaten, bloody father crying on the bathroom floor. Despite Walt mistakenly calling him Jesse in his semi-conscious state, Walt Jr. stayed overnight to care for him. The next morning, he told his father that he preferred seeing him emotional and vulnerable to how he'd been acting for the past year, because at least it was real. In this moment, Walt Jr. offered acceptance of his father's brokenness, charity in its most fundamental form. His most profound act of charity came when, after finally learning the truth about his father, he physically shielded his mother from Walt's aggression during their knife fight. Despite years of defending and idolizing his father, Walt Jr. instantly redirected his protection to where it was truly needed. This was charity stripped of sentimentality, love expressed through protection rather than blind loyalty. I believe that Walt Jr. represents the only uncorrupted character in the series, someone who, despite being surrounded by moral compromise, never lost his capacity to give freely. His final rejection of his father's blood money was its ultimate expression, the refusal to be purchased or manipulated, maintaining the integrity of true giving. Unlike his father's conditional love that came with manipulations and expectations, Walt Jr.'s charity remained the one pure element in a world of contamination. While Walter Jr. represented the giving heart of Breaking Bad's moral universe, another character's fortitude in the face of shattering adversity embodied a different virtue entirely. Under the flashy suits and cheap commercials, Saul Goodman was Breaking Bad's unlikely workaholic. Where others sought quick money or power grabs, Saul built his criminal law practice brick by brick, client by shady client. The journey from struggling lawyer to Albuquerque's go-to criminal lawyer didn't happen overnight. Saul plastered his face on billboards and benches, filmed those infamous late-night commercials, and made himself impossible to ignore. His constant hustle paid off. He became a local celebrity among both criminals and ordinary citizens who needed legal loopholes. When it came to criminal connections, Saul never cut corners. He didn't just know a guy who knew a guy. He maintained an entire network of fixers, money launderers, and escape artists. His nail salon fronts, offshore accounts, and even his vacuum repair disappearance service weren't lucky finds, but carefully cultivated resources built through years of networking.
So if you want to make more money and keep the money that you make, better call Saul.
crisis brought out Saul's true work ethic. When Hank discovered Walt's identity, Saul didn't freeze. He immediately deployed his men to rescue the money. When Jesse became a liability, Saul arranged for his extraction without hesitation. No problem was too big for his determined problem solving, no matter how many laws he had to bend. Even his own escape showed his meticulous nature. While others would have panicked, Saul calmly shredded evidence, collected hidden cash, and gave Francesca detailed instructions for covering their tracks. As his entire work life crumbled, he executed his exit plan with the same thoroughness that built his practice. What made Saul fascinating was how his incredible work ethic lacked any moral compass. Unlike Walt's destructive pride or Gus's consuming greed, Saul's diligence itself wasn't the problem. It was just pointed in the wrong direction. These same qualities could have made him a legendary legitimate attorney. Instead, all that hustle and ingenuity ended with him hiding in Nebraska, managing a Cinnabon under a fake name, his talents buried alongside his real identity. While Saul misapplied diligence, built and then lost an empire, another character quietly showed how strength can emerge from the most unexpected places. Andrea Kentio offered the one thing that Breaking Bad's world always lacked: simple human kindness with no strings attached. Jesse found Andrea at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting when he was at his lowest. Despite her own battles with addiction and raising Brock alone, she never judged Jesse. She saw not a dealer or an addict, but a person worth knowing. When she told Jesse about her brother Tomas killing Combo, her pain was real, not manipulation, just honest grief shared between two people who understood loss.
The day Brock was born, I swore I won't let what happened to Tomas happen to my son. I'll die first.
What made Andrea truly special was how she let Jesse be himself. Everyone else in Jesse's life wanted something from him. Walt needed his connection, Gus needed his skills, and even his friends used him for drugs or money. Andrea just wanted his company. When he left money in her mailbox to help her move to a safer neighborhood, she did exactly that. No schemes, no selfish detours. In a show where trust always came with betrayal, Andrea's simple honesty shone like a rare gem. Her home became the only place where Jesse glimpsed normal life. She welcomed him, made space for him with Brock, and showed him what a family could be. Even when Brock was poisoned, Andrea stayed strong without turning bitter. She faced the crisis with the same quiet grace that defined her character, worried for her son, but never losing her compassion in the process. Walt knew exactly what he was corrupting when he came to Andrea looking for Jesse. Jesse might be using drugs again, and Andrea didn't react with anger or disappointment. She simply left a message offering help, her kindness making her the perfect unwitting bait in Walt's trap. The show's most manipulative character, exploited by its most genuine one. Todd's decision to shoot Andrea at her doorstep stands as Breaking Bad's most brutal moment because it felt like watching kindness itself being murdered. As she greeted Todd with the same openness she showed everyone, not knowing Jesse was watching helplessly from the car, her death proved the show's darkest truth, that goodness cannot survive in a world built on selfishness. Jesse's anguished screams watching Andrea die marked something beyond the loss of someone he loved. It was the final theft of a normal life he glimpsed with her. When he eventually strangled Todd with his chains, it was justice for the one purely good thing his world had known. In a universe where everyone broke bad, Andrea never did. Her kindness remained uncorrupted to the end, and that made her both its most beautiful character and its most tragic casualty. Mike Ehrmantraut embodied patience in its most dangerous form. Every move he made was intentional. He listened more than he spoke. He studied people until they revealed exactly what he needed to know. His power came not from intimidation, but from control over time, over situations, over himself. By the time Breaking Bad began, Mike worked under Gus Fring, cleaning up bodies, intercepting threats, and keeping volatile figures like Walt from bringing down the operation. He calmly removed Jane's overdose evidence and instructed Jesse how to speak to paramedics, never once letting emotion cloud the job. When he tailed Skyler or intercepted Walt outside Beneke Fabricators, Mike was always a step ahead, waiting for the exact moment to act, never sooner. He saw the scythe outside Walt's house before Walt even knew that he was being hunted. He warned Gus of the cousins' plan and time to reroute their wrath. Later, during a cartel ambush, Mike survived a shotgun attack inside a truck, bleeding and battered because he had anticipated the worst and planned for it. His defining moment came when, instead of helping Walt with a scheme to protect Jesse, he told a quiet story from his past about letting an abuser live, only for that man to kill his wife weeks later. His advice to Walt was simple: no more half measures. It was a confession, a man who once waited too long and decided he never would again.
You know, I haven't slept since Thursday. I was out all night cleaning up after you. I need my sleep.
But his patience couldn't save him. When his men were arrested and his money seized, Mike refused to break. He tried to disappear quietly. Walt asked for names and Mike refused. And as a result, Walt shot him. Mike drove off, wounded until he reached the edge of a riverbank. He sat down and said nothing more than,
Shut the fuck
He stayed loyal to his code until the end, and in the next section, he meets someone who started with a code too, someone who believed in justice, but let that belief turn into something far darker. Tyrus Kit never stepped out of line. He followed orders with unwavering precision, spoke only when necessary, and carried out every task without hesitation. He wasn't there to question or lead. His loyalty belonged entirely to Gus Fring, and he never once acted as if he deserved more. Introduced after Victor's death, Tyrus became the new enforcer watching over Walt and Jesse. He wasn't flashy or theatrical. He simply appeared, quietly observing every move, ready to step in if anything went wrong. When Jesse's money was stolen by a squatter, Tyrus called Mike without comment, retrieved the bag, and walked away. That was his way, efficient, obedient, and visible. He followed orders that went beyond surveillance, and when Walt brought in unauthorized help to clean the lab, Tyrus immediately removed them, putting them on a bus back to Honduras with no argument and no scene. Later, when Gus was recovering from Mexico and Mike was still hospitalized, Tyrus stepped in to oversee the entire lab operation. Walt tried manipulating the weights to frame him, but Tyrus caught it instantly, giving him a silent loaded stare. He didn't need to escalate, he knew his place, and he did his job. Even when Gus ordered him to tase and abduct Walt, Tyrus did it without hesitation. He brought Walt into the desert, restrained and hooded, and stood silently while Gus threatened his life. Simple execution. His final job was checking Hector Salamanca's nursing home for threats. He scouted the room, tested for bugs, swept the perimeter, and missed Walt by inches. With one last glance and a quiet nod, he gave Gus the all clear. Moments later, the bell rang, the bomb exploded, and Tyrus was gone, dying in service, still following instructions to the end. Tyrus never asked for recognition. He did what he was told, and when it was time to die, he didn't argue. His humility was absolute, and it killed him. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on, and I'll see you in the next one where we break down every single person Gustavo Fring killed.